Today, he'll discover that stability is an illusion and trust can be weaponized. Not calls, not words, just one look from a stranger, and everything that once felt solid begins to crack. The words, "I love you," will ring hollow, and betrayal will take on a brutal clarity. But the real story won't begin when his world falls apart. It will begin when he decides to rebuild from the ashes. On his own terms, cold, precise, merciless, and no one walks away without consequences. Hey friend, before we get started, do me a favor. Check out the description and subscribe to my friend's channel. It means a lot to him. Let's go. Wyatt Keller's fingers danced across the keyboard with practiced urgency. The clock in the corner of his monitor glowed 9:40 p.m. Another late night buried in engineering plans, but the Miller account couldn't afford delays. He'd promised the client their structural blueprints would be ready by morning, and Wyatt wasn't the kind of man to break a promise. The office around him had long gone quiet, his colleagues having filed out hours earlier to return to their homes and families. Beyond his window, the Chicago skyline glittered against the night, a brilliant constellation of steel and light, each tower a tribute to the principles he'd built his life upon: precision, resilience, and unwavering discipline. A small alert blinked onto his screen. 3 missed calls from Camille. He had texted her earlier, letting her know he'd be staying late once again, but whether she had forgotten or simply didn't care was becoming harder to tell. Lately, it felt more like the latter. He rubbed his eyes, heavy with fatigue, the morning's conversation echoing in his mind. Another late night? She'd asked, without looking up from her phone, sipping coffee like it was just another day. The gallery's unveiling something new tonight. I hoped you'd be there. He had told her the Miller job had been escalated, that this client was vital to the firm's future. Surely she understood. Her response had been a familiar one, an expression that blended exasperation with something more elusive, something harder to name. Everything matters to the firm, Wyatt, but when do we matter? The sound of footsteps in the hallway drew him back. Mason from accounting hovered at the threshold, coat over his arm, an awkward tension in his usually cheerful demeanor. "You're still at it?" he asked. "Miller deadline," Wyatt said, gesturing toward the glowing CAD drawings on his screen. "Need to double-check the support specs. Heading out?" Mason hesitated, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Yeah, I stopped by O'Malley's earlier. Thought I saw Camille there." Wyatt's hands paused mid-keystroke. "Camille? She said she'd be working late. Gallery prep." Mason's discomfort deepened, his fingers fumbling with a coat button. She wasn't alone. Some guy was with her. Might have been a contractor or something. They looked close. The keyboard sat untouched as Wyatt processed the words. She was laughing a lot. At everything he said. His hand was on her leg. Mason's voice dropped. "I normally wouldn't say anything, but you are," Wyatt said quietly, though his pulse thundered. Mason stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I just thought you should know. They looked familiar. Too familiar." That word, familiar, hung in the air like fog. Wyatt clenched his jaw, but his tone stayed even. "How long were they there?" "Over an hour. Still there when I left." Mason ran a hand through his hair. "Maybe it's nothing. Just a misunderstanding." "Appreciate the heads up, Mason." Wyatt's voice made it clear the conversation had ended. When Mason left, Wyatt sat motionless, staring at his monitor. The missed calls from Camille now felt sinister in their timing. He picked up his phone, scrolling through a string of recent texts. "Working late. Don't wait up. New installation tonight. Dinner's off. Meeting a buyer. Might go late." Each message now carried an unfamiliar weight, the kind that pulled at the pit of his stomach. He opened their shared calendar and started piecing together her past few months. Patterns emerged gradually, like blueprints revealing an unwanted design. Private gallery events that never showed up on the official schedule. meetings that conveniently overlapped with his own long hours, weekend workshops she never discussed afterward. A new message flashed across his screen. From Camille, still at the gallery. So much to prep for the exhibit. Miss you. His fingers tightened around the phone until the bones in his hand showed white. The words stung with deceit. He thought back to the subtle shifts, the wardrobe upgrades, the expensive perfume, the sudden obsession with gym classes, the way she started placing her phone face down every time he walked in. He saved his work without a second thought and powered off the monitor. The Miller account would have to wait. For the first time in his career, Wyatt Keller was going to miss a deadline. The drive home was agonizingly slow. His mind looped through every memory, every lonely meal, every unnoticed change in routine. The streets were nearly empty, but every red light stretched on forever, giving him more time to reflect on the clues he'd chosen to ignore. "You've changed," she'd told him not long ago. "You used to be spontaneous, more alive." "I'm still the same man," he'd replied, caught off guard by the accusation. He kept grinding forward, chasing the version of tomorrow they once envisioned together. But lately, he wasn't sure that dream was even his anymore. As he turned into the driveway, he noticed Camille's car wasn't there. A quick glance at his watch. 10:30 p.m. The gallery had shut its doors 4 hours earlier. Inside the modern, sparse home, Camille's dream rendered in steel and stone, Wyatt wandered through the dimness without turning on a single light. He poured himself a modest measure of whiskey and sank into the hush of the house. Darkness didn't bother him. In fact, the shadows seemed to highlight things he'd long overlooked. A new perfume bottle sitting untouched on her vanity, a receipt from a gym she'd once mocked, a glimpse of a text that had made her beam, before she quickly tucked her phone away. The place no longer felt like home. Doubt had seeped into its foundations. Every room carried echoes of a past that now felt insincere. The kitchen, once filled with laughter and shared meals, Camille always elegant, always magnetic, he couldn't help but wonder if any of it had been genuine. The couch in the living room, where they used to speak of dreams and forever. Maybe she'd already begun crafting a new life, one that excluded him. He picked up his phone and opened their joint bank account. The transactions told stories she hadn't. Lunches at spots he'd never heard her mention. Charges from upscale boutiques on days she was supposedly working. A hotel stay she once blamed on a gallery event. Just past midnight, headlights washed across the walls. A car door shut. Keys clinked together. Her figure appeared in the doorway, framed by the porch light. "Wyatt?" She startled when she noticed him in the shadows. "God, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" Her tone was breezy, trying too hard. "How was the gallery?" His reply was quiet even. Camille flicked on the lights. The brightness revealed a sleek black dress, one unfamiliar to him, not something worn for art shows. Her makeup was flawless, her hair set with care, more attention than he'd seen her give a night with him in years. "Oh, you know," she said offhandedly. "Busy night, new opening." "Strange. Mason said he spotted you at O'Malley's." The silence that followed sliced through the room. Her hand froze near the switch. Her posture stiffened. When she faced him again, the mask of innocence had dropped. In its place was someone composed, calculating. "Were you checking up on me?" Her voice edged with accusation. Wyatt's pulse quickened, but his tone held. "Tell me the truth, Camille. Who were you with?" "Why should it matter?" she snapped, tossing her purse onto the counter like a challenge. "You're never around. You're always buried in your projects and timelines. You think I don't get lonely?" Wyatt rose slowly, setting the glass down with care. "Don't spin this. Just say his name." "Trent." She didn't blink, didn't hesitate. The name landed like a blow, wielded with cruel precision. Her chin lifted, daring him. He makes me feel something. Makes me feel alive. The sentence landed like iron between them. Wyatt's hands clenched at his sides. His wedding ring seemed to sear into his skin. How long? What does it matter? How long, Camille? She folded her arms, her stance defiant. 3 months. And no, I'm not sorry. She stepped closer, voice rising. He understands me in a way you never did. If you had truly loved me, you'd see why I needed more. Wyatt stared at her, seeing not the woman he'd asked to marry him, not the partner he'd tried to build a life with, but perhaps the person she'd been all along and he had refused to acknowledge. If I loved you? His voice was low, tight. I gave you everything. This house, that gallery job, every last thing you ever asked for. And this is what I get back? She scoffed and rolled her eyes, beginning to pace. You gave me things, Wyatt. Stuff. Where was the intimacy? Where was the passion? When was the last time you kissed me just because? When was the last time you stopped obsessing over your deadlines long enough to notice me? When was the last time you told me the truth? He felt fury creeping up, hot and sharp. While I was working myself to the bone to build something for us, you were sleeping with a guy who paints drywall. The sound of the slap cracked through the air like lightning. He caught her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was firm, but controlled. Their eyes locked, hers wide, the first hint of fear surfacing, his burning with betrayed anger. Don't, he said, voice ice. He let go of her arm. Don't you dare play the victim. That right disappeared the second you decided to cheat. He turned and walked away, headed for the bedroom. Her footsteps clicked behind him, urgent. What are you doing? He threw open the closet and dragged out a suitcase. If Trent is everything you say he is, he said, tossing it onto the bed, then go be with him. Wyatt, stop. You're blowing this out of proportion. Her voice cracked, suddenly thinner, less certain. We can fix this. Let's just talk. Couples run into problems like this all the time. But we weren't like them. That single phrase cut through her excuses like a blade. Maybe others could look the other way. I won't. I can't. He said nothing, just kept at it, deliberate and steady, as he pulled her clothes off the hangers and tossed them into the open suitcase. Silk tops, fitted dresses, all the designer pieces he'd once given her, now flung in without a shred of care. Wyatt, stop. You're overreacting. One bad decision, he said, barely looking at her. Try 3 months of them. He moved to the dresser next, rifling through drawers with a ruthless rhythm. Forgetting to mail a check, that's a slip. Burning dinner, fine. But this? Spending 3 months in someone else's bed and lying about it? That's not a slip-up. That's a choice. Camille caught his arm, desperate to slow him down, to shift the course. People do terrible things. They regret them. They grow from them. We could see a therapist. Try to fix this, she pleaded. He shook off her hand and yanked the suitcase shut, the zipper hissing like a final verdict. You made your choice, Camille. Now you live with it. You're just throwing everything away? Her voice cracked. Wyatt finally turned, face like stone. Throwing away what? The lies? The betrayal? Show me what's left to save. I still love you, she whispered, tears now slipping freely down her cheeks. Doesn't that count for something? Love? He echoed, letting out a bitter laugh. If that's what this is. From where I'm standing, it looks like convenience. You loved the life I gave you, the stability, the ease. But me? He shook his head. You didn't love me. You never did. Her expression crumbled, mascara painting black trails down her skin. Once upon a time, those tears might have softened him. Now they felt like strategy. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered. Ask Trent, Wyatt said flatly. Seems like you two clicked. I'm sure he'll make room. He dragged the packed suitcase to the front door and dropped it outside. When he came back, she was still frozen in the hallway, all signs of her usual composure gone. You can't just abandon me like this, she murmured. I'm not doing this to you, he said, calmly holding the door. You did this. You've got an hour to grab anything else. After that, I'm changing the locks. Camille tried one more angle. People won't understand. Our friends, they'll think you're cold, kicking me out like this. Wyatt chuckled, dry and sharp. Want to bet? Tell them whatever you want. Go ahead, spin the story, make me the villain, the distant workaholic who pushed you into someone else's bed. I'll say you left me first, she snapped. Emotionally, that your career always came before me, that I what? His eyes locked onto hers, voice steady. Paid the bills? Supported every dream you had? Trusted you completely? Say whatever helps you sleep, Camille, but the truth doesn't stay buried. He watched as a slow realization hit her. Her stance weakened, her resolve unwound. Without saying more, she picked up her purse and gathered a few last things, then quietly stepped out. At the doorway, her fingers brushed the railing. Wyatt, she said softly. I'm sorry. No, he said, voice low. You're just sorry I caught you. Then he shut the door behind her with a resolute click and slid the bolt into place. From the window, he watched her wrestle the suitcase into her car. When her taillights finally vanished around the corner, he picked up his phone. First, he called a locksmith. Then he typed a single group message. Camille cheated. She's gone. If she reaches out, remember? It was her call. Every bit of it. He turned off the phone without waiting for replies. In the silence that followed, he poured himself another drink and sat down. There was dismantling to do. He had given her everything, his trust, his love, his home, and she discarded it. Tomorrow, he would begin unraveling the life they'd built. Tonight, he would sit in stillness and let his fury cool into something sharper. Camille thought she could steer him, through tears, guilt, stories, but she'd never truly understood the man she was dealing with. Wyatt Keller had built his entire life on discipline, clarity, and a code that didn't break. Now, she was about to learn exactly what that meant. He had entered marriage with the same rigorous focus he brought to every important pursuit in his life. Now that Camille had shattered that vow, he intended to manage the fallout with his characteristic precision and discipline. There would be no turning back, no forgiveness, only measured, relentless justice. The whiskey burned its way down his throat, but Wyatt embraced the pain. It was a welcome distraction from the gaping wound in his chest, once filled with trust, now overtaken by fury. Rage, he decided, would serve him far better than love ever had. His phone vibrated again on the table. Camille's name lit up the screen. Her fourth attempt tonight. He stared at the glowing display until it faded to black. 7 years of marriage, obliterated by 3 months of betrayal. He should have seen it coming, should have sensed the shift, but he'd been too consumed with building their future to notice her undermining their present. When the locksmith arrived 30 minutes later, he worked quickly and without questions, replacing each lock in quiet efficiency. Wyatt tipped him generously for the late visit, then lingered in the entryway, new keys clutched in his hand, feeling like a stranger in the house that used to be his sanctuary. Tomorrow, the fallout would begin. Friends would call, gossip would spread, and the fragments of their shared life would scatter. Wyatt was ready. He had spent his career deconstructing intricate problems and solving them with calm, logical resolve. This situation would be no different. Camille had played her hand. Now it was his move. No mercy, no doubt, no redemption. The night stretched ahead, murky and long. But Wyatt Keller had never feared the unknown. He would start again, this time on solid ground, free from the lies that had propped up their marriage, and he would make certain Camille understood exactly what she had given up. Sitting in his office, Wyatt lifted the phone and dialed an old contact from his contracting days. After a week of methodical digging, The puzzle pieces were starting to align. Tiago, ever heard of a builder named Trent? Chicago area guy? Trent Pritchard? Tiago's voice crackled on speaker. Yeah, I know him. Bit of a loose cannon, always stretching himself too thin, cutting corners to meet deadlines. Why are you asking? Wyatt's hand tightened around the edge of his desk. I've heard some concerning things. Thought you might have more. Plenty, Tiago said with a dry laugh. Last year he poured a foundation with cheap concrete. They had to tear the whole thing out and redo it. Cost a fortune. Still wins contracts, though. How does he manage that? Smooth talk, mostly. The man could convince a fish to buy water. That, and he always underbids everyone else. I don't know how he stays afloat. Wyatt's fingers danced across his laptop keyboard. Send me whatever you've got on him. Let's call it a favor between professionals. Sure. But Wyatt... Tiago paused. This isn't about those rumors involving Camille, is it? Just being thorough, Wyatt said evenly. You know how I feel about cutting corners. After hanging up, Wyatt immersed himself in research, tracing financial records, combing through corporate filings, evaluating contractor reviews, all of it public, but buried deep, exactly where most people wouldn't think to look. The image became clearer. Trent Pritchard was drowning in debt, relying on loans just to keep operations moving. A knock at the door pulled Wyatt out of his investigation. Lena McAllister stood there, concern etched across her face. I figured I'd find you lost in work, she said, stepping into the room. Did you remember to eat? Wyatt glanced at the clock, surprised to see the afternoon already gone. I've been distracted. Plotting Trent Pritchard's professional downfall? She placed a paper bag on his desk and sank into the chair across from him. I brought food, and don't bother arguing. I'll force feed you if I have to. I'm fine. Wyatt Keller, don't even start. I've known you since middle school. Don't make me come across this desk with a fork. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. Lena had always been like this, direct, loyal, impossible to ignore. She was the first person he called when Camille walked out. She'd shown up with strong coffee and sharper clarity. How do you know about Pritchard? He asked. She unwrapped a sandwich and slid it toward him. Please, you think I haven't noticed? You've got that same look you used to get before you demolished someone in debate club. He took a bite and realized how long it had been since he'd eaten. He's connected to the Riverside Project, high-stakes commercial development, and he's been cutting corners for years. Cheap materials, underpaid workers, just barely skirting legality. His eyes sparkled with something that looked like purpose. Exactly the kind of behavior responsible developers ought to be warned about. Wyatt, Lena leaned forward. Are you sure about this? Revenge won't fix what she broke. This isn't about revenge, he said, meeting her gaze. It's about consequences. The moment he chased after a woman wearing another man's ring, his fate was sealed. Now he had no choice but to live with the aftermath. Don't let this eat you alive. I never do. The days that followed unfolded like a quiet, calculated battle. Wyatt reached out to his contacts across the industry, dropping veiled remarks that cast doubt on Trent's integrity. He submitted anonymous reports to city regulators, highlighting potential safety breaches at various sites. Each move was measured, within the bounds of the law, and utterly ruinous. The repercussions came fast. Riverside developers rescinded their contract with Trent, and soon after, others pulled out of pending agreements. The polished image Trent had spent years polishing, built on charisma and hollow assurances, crumbled under the weight of scrutiny. One night, Wyatt pushed open the doors of O'Malley's, the bar where Trent and Camille had once paraded their affair without shame. He needed a drink. Maybe, on some level, he needed to reclaim the space that had been tainted. By the time he was halfway through his second glass of whiskey, a familiar voice rose above the ambient chatter. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Mr. Always Working. Wyatt turned deliberately. Trent Pritchard was swaying behind him, obviously drunk. His crisp persona had vanished, shirt wrinkled, eyes rimmed with red. "Pritchard," Wyatt said coolly. "Having a rough one?" "You self-righteous bastard," Trent slurred as he stumbled forward. "You think I can't see what you're up to? Making calls, spreading crap, rumors?" Wyatt took another drink, unbothered. "I just told people what they should have known already. Amazing how fast the truth burns." "Truth?" Trent barked out a bitter laugh. "Here's some truth for you. Your wife came to me. She wanted something real, and believe me, she showed her appreciation." The room stilled. Conversations died mid-sentence. Tension tightened the air like a wire. Wyatt placed his glass on the bar with careful calm. "Something real?" he repeated as he stood. "A real man doesn't seduce someone else's wife. A real man doesn't endanger lives with unfinished buildings and shady deals. You're a fraud, Pritchard. In business, in character, in everything." "At least I know how to satisfy a woman." Trent spat, jabbing Wyatt in the chest. "No wonder she walked out on you." Wyatt's punch landed before Trent could even finish the sentence. The impact snapped Trent's head back. He staggered, swung wildly. Wyatt ducked with practiced ease, reflexes honed in the ring, and drove his fist into Trent's gut, sending him to one knee. "Stay down," he warned. But Trent scrambled up again, flailing. Wyatt blocked the blow, then responded. 3 swift strikes, jaw, ribs, stomach. Trent reeled into a table, crashed to the floor, gasping for breath. Wyatt straightened his coat, looked down at him with nothing but contempt. "The difference between us isn't how we fight. It's who we are when the fight's over. You've never had the spine for honesty." He turned to the bartender. "Sorry for the mess. Bill me for the cleanup." Then, to Trent, "The next time you brag about sleeping with someone's wife, remember this. Remember what it costs to build your world on lies." He walked out of O'Malley's, posture tall. Trent's moans faded behind him. His knuckles throbbed, but it was a clean pain, a just one. This wasn't a loss of control. It was the reckoning Trent had long invited. His phone buzzed. Camille, again. She'd been reaching out endlessly since Trent's downfall made the rounds. He let it ring out, just like all the other times. The following morning, his office door burst open. Camille stood there, a wreck. Mascara streaked, hair unkempt, gripping her purse like it might hold her together. "You ruined him," she said through clenched teeth. "Was that the goal? Is this your victory?" Wyatt didn't even glance up. "Did you come here for something?" He lost everything, his business, his reputation. "Actions have consequences," Wyatt cut in. Now he looked at her, gaze sharp as cut stone. "He knew you were married and went for it anyway. You knew you were married and still chased him. This," he gestured around them, "this is the fallout." Her voice broke. "I'm living out of my car. No one will return my calls. The gallery put me on leave. Please, Wyatt. I made a terrible mistake. I want to come home." Wyatt stepped out from behind his desk slowly, deliberately. "There is no home here for you anymore. You traded it in, for cheap highs with a con artist. I'll do therapy, whatever it takes." She reached for his hand. "I still love you." He recoiled like her touch had scorched him. "No, you love the stability, the lifestyle, the illusion, but not me. Not really." "That's not fair," she sobbed. "I was lost. I felt invisible. Trent was a mistake. A mistake you made over and over. For 3 months," Wyatt said, his voice like steel. "A mistake you carried into hotel rooms and buried in lies. You lost yourself, Camille. Completely consumed by your own world. And now that it's fallen apart, all you feel is disappointment that your plan didn't play out." She collapsed into the chair, sobbing quietly. "Is that what you want? An apology? For me to admit I regret every bit of it? Fine, I do. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." "I just want you out," Wyatt replied, his voice low. He swung open the door to his office. You need to face the consequences of your actions. And let me be clear, there won't be any forgiveness from me. Wyatt, please, don't do this. I'll call security if I have to. For a long second, Camille just stared at him, desperate to find any hint of compassion in his eyes. But there was nothing there. Her hand shook as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. You're going to regret this, she whispered. Someday you'll wish you'd given us a second chance. Wyatt let out a sharp, humorless laugh. My only regret is not seeing your true colors sooner. Goodbye, Camille. Once she was gone, he reached for the phone and dialed. She's not done. Prepare for something reckless. He was right. Within days, Camille filed for alimony, claiming she'd been emotionally abandoned and financially reliant. But Wyatt's lawyer arrived armed, with bank statements, hotel receipts, and text messages she had never bothered to delete. The judge dismissed her claims in less than an hour. Wyatt remained expressionless as Camille fled the courtroom in tears. He watched her go without the slightest reaction. She had made her choices, and now she would live with them. That night, Lena showed up at his place with a bag of takeout, spreading the containers across the counter. Heard what happened in court, she said, passing him a beer. You doing okay? I'm fine, Wyatt said, taking a long drink. It's finally over. Is it really? Lena asked, studying his face. Or is this the start of something else for you? Trent Pritchard brought himself down. I just exposed the truth. And Camille? She chose her own path. He poked at his food, distracted. When we were kids, I thought everything was black or white. No shades in between, Lena said softly. But most of life lives in the gray areas. She rested a hand lightly on his arm. You've always been guided by principle, sometimes frustratingly so, but it's why I've always trusted you. He looked at her, absorbing the warmth in her steady gaze. I'm not falling apart, Lena. I'm rebuilding. This time, from a stronger foundation. I know, she replied with a soft smile, and I'll make sure you're actually eating while you do it. For the first time in weeks, something like peace settled over him. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was steady, solid. Sitting there with Lena, someone who had always seen him clearly and never looked away, he began to picture a future beyond the betrayal. His phone buzzed. Another message from Camille. Without reading it, he deleted it and turned the phone off. Thanks, he said. She nodded. She knew what he meant. She always had. The hammer slammed against the countertop, each strike deliberate and echoing through the quiet house. Wyatt stopped, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and surveyed the shattered granite, the one Camille had insisted on installing, and charged to his credit card without a second thought. Getting somewhere? Lena called from behind him. She stood in the doorway holding 2 coffees, her hair pulled back, every bit her usual practical self. Wyatt turned, a slow grin forming. Starting to think I should have hired someone for this. And give up the satisfaction of destroying it yourself? Not a chance. She picked her way carefully through the rubble and handed him a cup. Morning sun poured through the windows, lighting up the floating dust. Wyatt took a sip. Black, no sugar, just how he liked it. Unlike Camille, Lena had never tried to change who he was. I'm thinking about putting in a new island, he said, nodding toward the empty space. Something functional this time, not just for show. That would be perfect here, she said, running her hand along the wall. Any thoughts on color? Leaning toward darker shades, something more industrial, cleaner lines. He set the cup down. No more of that. What did she call it? Coastal grandmother chic? Lena suggested with a smirk. That drew a real laugh from Wyatt, one of the first in a long time, and one that felt like it might stay. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Camille. He didn't even look at it. The notifications landed in a folder Wyatt never even glanced at. Lena noticed the barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. Still hearing from her? she asked. As usual, Wyatt defaulted to his metaphorical wrecking ball, his standard coping strategy. Any message sent might as well vanish into empty space. By the way, Lena added, tapping the wall beside her, didn't you mention wanting to open up this section? He nodded briefly, clearly glad for the shift in subject. Turns out, it's load-bearing. So, no dice. I'm thinking about installing steel shelving instead. They spent the next hour bouncing around renovation ideas. Lena's suggestions were pragmatic and aligned with his vision, never veering off into territory that wasn't his. Their conversation flowed with a natural ease, a give and take his marriage to Camille had always lacked. Later that afternoon, Wyatt sat in his office at home, reviewing blueprints and project outlines. His position at the firm had only strengthened lately. His colleagues had started noticing how laser-focused and driven he'd become. Then his office phone rang. It was his boss. Got a second, Wyatt? The Gibson account came through. Biggest one we've landed this quarter. We're slammed, and honestly, you're the only person I'd trust to take point. Pride flickered through him. Send me everything. I'll get started tonight. You sure? It's a heavy lift, even for you. I like keeping busy, Wyatt said, already pulling up his calendar. I've got a few concerns about the structural notes in the initial documents. Exactly why I'm your guy, Wyatt replied. Files are on the way, Mason said before hanging up. As the call ended, Wyatt leaned back in his chair, letting a quiet sense of accomplishment settle in. What Camille had once labeled as obsessive, his co-workers now praised as dedication. She used to complain he was too intense. At the firm, that same intensity had a new name, reliable. A doorbell chime broke his thoughts. Reflexively, he checked the camera feed, a habit he'd developed after Camille started mysteriously appearing in places she had no reason to be. It was only Jack, his contractor, punctual as ever for their discussion on electrical upgrades. As they walked through the house and reviewed the latest plans, Jack gave a low whistle. You've really been tearing through this place, he said. Wyatt, he reminded with a nod, gesturing toward where he wanted new outlets. And yeah, it's been therapeutic, I guess. Jack gave him a knowing look. Word gets around. Heard about what's going on with your wife. Wyatt's jaw tightened slightly. Ex-wife, he corrected evenly. Right. My bad. Jack quickly shifted back to business, pulling up diagrams and lighting specs on his tablet. Later that evening, after Jack had left, Wyatt stood in the stripped-down remains of what used to be his kitchen. With bare beams and tools scattered everywhere, he felt oddly at peace. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. Remember dinner? You tend to forget when you're elbows deep in a project. He glanced at the clock. She was right. He'd forgotten. Guilty. About to order something now, he texted back. Got leftover lasagna. Want it? Way better than takeout in a bag. He paused. With Camille, every favor had strings. But Lena had proven time and again that she wasn't playing that game. Only if it's no trouble, he replied. 20 minutes later, they sat at a makeshift table, 2 folding chairs, and a temporary setup in the space that would eventually become his new dining room. So, Lena asked between bites, what's this Gibson account I keep hearing about at your job? Wyatt dove into the explanation, his voice animated as he described the project's complexities. It had been a long time since he'd spoken so freely without being shut down. Camille would have rolled her eyes and called it dull. But Lena listened, nodded, even asked insightful questions, drawing from her own experience in counseling and case management. You seem more like yourself again, she said softly, focused, energized, like the Wyatt I remember. He lowered his fork, digesting the comment. I think I lost sight of that guy for a while. We all do, she said with a small shrug. What matters is finding your way back. Their eyes held for a moment, something quiet but undeniable shifting between them. Neither mentioned it. there was time. Neither one was in a rush. After she left, Wyatt stood in the driveway, watching her taillights disappear around the corner. The night air was cool, carrying a hint of the changing season. Inside, the house was still in disarray, a construction site, really. But for the first time in a long while, Wyatt felt like a work in progress, too. And for once, that didn't seem like a bad thing. Then, on a Tuesday morning, it came. The envelope, nestled between a cable bill and junk mail. Wyatt read the legal document twice, his expression hardening with every line. Camille was suing, claiming spousal support, accusing him of abandonment, of leaving her destitute in a time of need. He didn't hesitate. He dialed his lawyer. "She's reaching," said Sloane Mercer, her tone calm and assured. "There's no substance here. I've already begun pulling together everything we'll need. She's got nerve, I'll give her that." "She's got something," Wyatt said coldly. "But it's not a case." She probably assumed he'd fold to avoid the hassle, a classic intimidation ploy. Wyatt let out a dry, humorless laugh. If that's what she was betting on, she didn't know him at all. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of planning and documentation. He gathered everything: financial statements, chat logs, emails, a detailed portfolio exposing Camille's lies and reckless spending. His friend Miles from IT even dug up deleted emails, uncovering her secret meetings with Trent during work hours she claimed were spent at the gallery. When the court date finally dawned, the morning was clear and crisp. Wyatt dressed with intention, choosing a sleek charcoal suit and the navy tie Lena once said brought out his eyes. He wanted to project the image of the composed, successful man he truly was. As he neared the courthouse, he saw Camille for the first time in what felt like an eternity. She wore her familiar pity outfit, a modest, unremarkable dress crafted to convey innocence. Their eyes briefly met across the parking lot. She hesitated, taking a few cautious steps in his direction, but Sloane, his lawyer, stepped in calmly but firmly. "No contact," she reminded him. Inside, they took their places. Wyatt sat straight-backed, calm and silent. Camille kept sneaking glances at him, her face a mixture of anxiety and appeal. Her attorney, a jittery young man Wyatt didn't recognize, fumbled nervously through his files. Judge Morgan entered, and the session began. Camille's lawyer launched the opening remarks, painting her as a devoted wife, abandoned by a cold, career-obsessed husband. "My client merely seeks fair support for the sacrifices she made in service of Mr. Keller's ambitions," the attorney declared. "She sidelined her own goals to support his path." "Objection, Your Honor," Sloane interjected smoothly. "Those are assertions not backed by evidence." She continued, "Mrs. Keller held full-time employment for the duration of the marriage." "Sustained," said Judge Morgan. "Stick to facts, counselor." Visibly shaken, the young attorney tried to regain his footing. "Yes, Your Honor. We can provide documentation of my client's present financial struggles." "And those struggles," Sloane replied crisply, "are the result of her own choices." She approached the bench with a thick binder. "Your Honor, this collection includes verified evidence of Mrs. Keller's financial improprieties, unapproved credit usage, and secret banking activities." Wyatt watched quietly as Sloane laid out the evidence methodically. Statements showed Camille transferring funds to a concealed account. Credit card records revealed lavish dinners with Trent while Wyatt was still at the office. Hotel bookings showed up on dates she'd claimed to be working overtime. "Additionally," Sloane said, turning another page, "we have direct text communications between Mrs. Keller and Mr. Trent Pritchard. In one, she explicitly states, and I quote, her intent to bleed Wyatt dry once her relationship with Mr. Pritchard was secure." Wyatt remained still, expression unreadable, but he could feel Camille's panic from across the courtroom. Her attorney leaned in, whispering frantically, clearly caught off guard by the mountain of evidence. Judge Morgan turned the pages one by one, her expression tightening with each revelation. Finally, She looked up and addressed Camille with an unflinching gaze. "Mrs. Keller," she said, her voice sharp and deliberate, "this court does not tolerate the manipulation of the legal process for personal advantage. The evidence here shows a clear breach of trust and deliberate financial deception." Camille stood up, voice trembling. "Your Honor, please, if I could just explain—" "You had that opportunity before committing fraud and infidelity," the judge cut in firmly. "Your request for spousal support is denied." She turned to the final page. "Furthermore, you are ordered to repay Mr. Keller for the unauthorized expenses, totaling $238,475.22. At that, Wyatt finally turned to face her. She had slumped into her seat, her complexion drained, the mask she wore for so long now stripped away. The fiction she had built, a tale of victimhood, lay in ruins, dismantled by her own actions. As Wyatt exited the courthouse, he heard hurried footsteps behind him and her voice calling out. "Wyatt, wait!" she cried, rushing after him. "I know I messed up. I have nowhere to go. I'm sleeping in my car. Please, help me." He turned slowly to face her, his eyes hard and steady. "You made your choices, Camille, again and again. You chose betrayal, you chose secrecy, you chose deceit, and now you're acting like you're the one who's been wronged." "I said I was sorry," she sobbed, tears falling freely. "What more do you want?" "Nothing," Wyatt replied coldly. "That's the point. I don't want anything from you. You shattered everything for a delusion with a grifter. Now you're living with the fallout. Your tears don't rewrite the past." "You're so cold," she whispered. "You used to love me." "I loved who I thought you were," he said without hesitation. "Someone faithful, someone true. But that woman? She was never real, was she?" Just then, Sloane walked up, briefcase in hand, her tone composed and firm. "Mrs. Keller, I suggest you leave." The judge's directive left no ambiguity. Contact was strictly prohibited. Camille's gaze shifted anxiously between the parties, her tear-streaked face smudged with mascara that traced dark lines down her cheeks. In that defining moment, Wyatt no longer recognized her as the companion he once cherished, but rather as the calculating, self-interested figure she had long veiled beneath layers of charm and performative emotion. "Goodbye, Camille," he stated with measured finality, turning away from her. Her cries trailed him across the pavement, yet he never once looked back. His priorities had evolved, and she no longer occupied any space within them. With the kitchen remodel finally complete, Wyatt stood alone in the transformed room, observing how the early light refracted across the polished stone surfaces and the clean lines of contemporary hardware. The centerpiece, a kitchen island once confined to rough sketches, now stood as a testament to minimalist design and practical aesthetics, both expansive and refined. A vibration from his phone drew his attention. Lena had sent a message. "Ready to unveil the masterpiece?" He responded with a smile, "Come see for yourself." While awaiting her arrival, he initiated a fresh brew cycle on his premium coffee machine, one of several deliberate purchases symbolizing a new chapter. The rich aroma intermingled with the faint scent of newly dried paint. When the doorbell rang, a warmth stirred in his chest, an echo of something enduring. Lena stood at the threshold, a bottle of champagne in hand, her expression luminous, a smile that radiated through her entire demeanor. "Celebrating with champagne?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Of course," she replied. "Finishing a renovation deserves a proper celebration." She stepped inside, but her movement halted abruptly as her eyes took in the redesigned space. "Wyatt, it's incredible." He observed her as she navigated the kitchen, her fingers trailing over countertops, drawers opened and admired for their thoughtful organization and custom details. "You thought of everything," she said, turning toward him. "It's completely you." He grinned. Was that a compliment disguised as critique? She handed over the bottle. "For you, It's always praise. Now, where are your glasses? Or did your compulsive neatness hide those too? From a neatly arranged cabinet, he retrieved two pristine champagne flutes, intentionally acquired for this symbolic new beginning. As he poured the sparkling wine, Lena leaned on the island, observing him closely. "You seem changed today," she remarked. "Do I?" he replied, his head tilted with curiosity. "There's something lighter about you. Was there a shift?" He placed the bottle down and met her eyes. "The court ruling came in yesterday. Camille's appeal was denied." Her expression turned serious. "So it's officially over?" "It is," he confirmed, handing her a glass. "Completely finished." The sentiment was genuine. He had never felt the word free so accurately define his state. They clinked their glasses, the champagne's effervescence casting prismatic flecks of light on the granite. After a moment of quiet, Lena ventured, "I've been reflecting on what you said last week, about fresh starts." Wyatt's pulse elevated subtly. "You have?" She placed her glass down, meeting his gaze directly. "We've shared years of friendship. You've become my closest confidant, but something's shifted. Lately it feels different." He nodded, sensing her thoughts. "It does. But I need certainty," she continued. "I can't be a temporary fix while you untangle your past." He stepped forward, reducing the space between them. "You've never been temporary," he said. "You were the one who showed me what sincere connection looks like, what authentic care feels like." "Are you truly ready for this?" she asked, her voice calm but searching. Rather than respond with words, he reached for her hand. The gesture felt instinctual, as though it had always been meant. "I'm not the person who married Camille," he said. "That man compromised himself for validation that was never real. You never asked me to reshape who I am." She squeezed his hand gently. "Because the real you is pretty remarkable, Wyatt Keller, even with your compulsive pantry labeling." He laughed and drew her into an easy embrace. "Coming from the woman who treats her file folders like a Pantone catalog?" "That's strategic, business necessity," she countered with a smirk. Their amusement faded into a calm silence. As Wyatt glanced around the space, his space, he felt a rare, grounded tranquility take root. "Stay for breakfast?" he asked. Her answer came with a smile. "I was hoping you'd offer." As they moved together through the kitchen, preparing a simple meal in harmonious rhythm, Wyatt recognized that something fundamental had changed. This was no longer merely about leaving Camille behind. It was about building something new, something real. Our first story ends now, but the excitement continues. Another powerful story starts right after this. Let's start. I'm Howard Trembeth, and right now, my life is undergoing the most radical transformation it's ever seen. I intentionally delayed settling down until I felt completely secure in my career. Lilith, my wife, and the only one I've ever had, was born just a few short weeks after I was. We both turned 50 earlier this year. When we got married, there wasn't much in the way of assets to safeguard, so we skipped any kind of prenup. We've spent the last 21 years in the same house, moving in a year after the wedding. It's where we brought our first baby home, and then, 2 years later, our second. Both of them are in college now, living their own lives. Not long ago, I convinced Lilith that it was time for us to downsize, relocate to a secure, 50-plus community. We found a place we liked, put in an offer, and handed over a few $1,000s in earnest money to secure the deal. That's why nearly all of our possessions are boxed up. But here's the part she doesn't know. I'm not going with her. Actually, neither of us is moving there at all. A few moments ago, I contacted our real estate agent and officially withdrew our offer. Losing a couple grand to make my exit clean felt like a reasonable price to pay. We'd already closed the sale of our current home earlier this week, on Monday, to be precise. We're expected to surrender the keys by the end of next week. Lilith thinks I left yesterday morning for a work-related trip. In reality, I quit my job last Friday. I purchased a one-way flight to Atlanta. From there, I've arranged for private transport heading south toward the Gulf. I'll be boarding a vessel in a few days, bound for an island where I'll begin again. I'm not planning to file for divorce, but I do intend to disappear, with every penny from the home sale, my retirement withdrawal, and the lion's share of our joint savings. I've assumed a new identity and plan to spend the remainder of my life drifting through the Caribbean. Setting up international accounts under a fabricated name wasn't cheap, but between digital banking options and a carefully executed laundering scheme, I've managed to convert everything into cryptocurrency under my alias. With over 10,000 crypto tokens in circulation, I'm betting the one I chose holds its value long enough for me to switch into something more secure. Digital assets have a way of dissolving when you need them most, much like Lilith's promises at the altar. Around 3 o'clock today, I rang her. She answered after a few rings, sounding mildly irritated. "Hi, sweetheart. How's your trip?" Same old, different city, same schedule. "What are you up to now?" "Still getting a few things organized and packed." That was lie number one. In truth, she was about 30 miles away at Arnold Pernice's place. Arnold is her current lover. Whether he's the first, I don't know, and frankly, I don't care. One betrayal is enough for me. I've occasionally imagined a violent end for both of them, but I chose another kind of revenge, one that's quieter, but far more permanent. I'll leave her with nothing. As for Arnold, I trust his wife will make sure he pays the price. "Did you label the boxes?" I asked her. "Yeah, of course. Mine say Lilith. Yours are marked Howard. That should make dividing the contents straightforward." "Could you look in my desk for my planner? Top drawer on the right." "Hold on a sec. It's not here. Are you sure that's where you put it?" That was lie number two. Unless she's back at the house, which she isn't, there's no way she could have checked. My brother's the one there now, cleaning up what remains. She's not coming back, and I'm not altering course. "You mentioned having lunch with some friends. Where'd you go? Anyone I'd know?" "We stopped by that diner near work, just some of the girls from the office." "What about dinner?" "Probably just going to order room service. The company's covering it." Lie number three. According to the private investigator I hired, she's been holed up at Arnold's since 9 this morning and hasn't stepped outside. "What's on your agenda tonight?" "Laundry and more packing. The dryer just buzzed. I've got to go." "Call me later?" "Love you. Talk soon." They say lying gets easier the more you do it, and with her, it's effortless now. I can't remember the last time I believed a word out of her mouth. Meanwhile, 2 rental trucks were stationed outside what used to be our home, movers scurrying to fill them as fast as possible. One truck, containing all of my things, was headed to a storage unit my brother secured earlier today. The other, on its 4th trip, was dropping off the rest at a consignment store. Both vehicles needed to be returned before 5 o'clock. By the time I ended the call with Lilith, the place we'd shared was likely stripped bare. All that's left now is to wait for my brother's confirmation. He definitely earned the $5 tip I gave him. My lawyer's overnight package was ready to go, sealed, labeled, and waiting for pickup. Inside, I'd enclosed every signed legal document, the house keys, and the garage remote. Lilith would have to surrender her own copies soon enough. My attorney would be contacting her shortly. I didn't bother trying to reach Lilith again. When I attempted to inform Arnold's wife about what the private investigator had uncovered, she abruptly ended the call. That's how people respond to truth, I guess. She'll still receive the entire case file, photos, recordings, the works, because it's being personally delivered today. And that was just one of the 17 packages I sent. The rest were duplicates, sent to Lilith's family, close friends, employer, siblings, and yes, even to our kids. The ones addressed to our children had a personal note inside. I told them how deeply disappointed I was, that I was leaving, and I didn't know if we'd ever speak again. but the one I felt most satisfied with, the one that let me finally exhale, was the one I sent to Lilith. It was my final word. I didn't expect anything from it, really, but writing it felt like closing a door. Lilith, if you haven't realized it yet, your affair has completely ruined this marriage. I've emptied all accessible accounts. I've taken the things I cared about from the house. Everything else has been sent to a consignment store. The itemized list is with my attorney. You're free to collect whatever money comes from the sales. I don't need it. And don't waste time looking for your jewelry. It's long gone. I sold it to one of those cash-for-gold shops. Your aunt's heirloom rings fetched the highest price. My own wedding band didn't amount to much. Go figure. The trinkets Arnold gave you were as worthless as the promises you made. The house has been cleared out, and I canceled the down payment on the new one. That whole purchase was a ruse to lock down full profits from selling our home. So thanks for playing along. I won't be initiating divorce proceedings. You'll have to handle that on your own if you ever come up with the money. I'm moving on. Maybe I'll meet someone worth my time. Not that it matters to you. I've already told the kids I'm leaving. They knew what you were doing. They kept quiet. That's all I needed to cut them out of my life. They've been told. I hope the mess you made doesn't come back to destroy you, but it might. I left your father's old pistol for you, with a box of ammo. Shame you never accepted my offer to learn how to shoot. Still, it's easy enough. Just aim and pull. You get it, right? If you're thinking about something extreme, just don't botch it. Arnold's arrogance is what tipped me off. If he hadn't been running his mouth, I'd still be blind. But he couldn't resist gloating to some bartender. What were the odds he'd end up at my brother Steve's bar? Steve clocked it right away. How many women are named Lilith? It was fate, I suppose, especially when Arnold pulled out that inappropriate photo. When he paid with his credit card, Steve asked for ID. From there, it was easy to get the evidence I needed. All this destruction. For him? How stupid can someone be? Never mind. You've already answered that. If the plan was to leave me for Arnold, you're welcome to go through with it. Just know you're on your own now. Thanks for a few memories, though they're mostly tainted now. Howard. I didn't even hang on to my phone. I gave it to a homeless guy sleeping behind the hotel dumpster. I'd already written down the few contacts I cared about. That night, I actually slept. To be honest, it took a handful of those tiny hotel liquor bottles to get me there. But I charged it all to my card, and I couldn't care less. I never planned to be around when the bill came due. Odds are, it'll never be paid. Lilith hasn't worked in over 2 decades. She stopped working not long after we got married, and she got pregnant. I had a good job, so she stayed home. But too much idle time after the kids left created a breeding ground for betrayal. My investigator couldn't confirm when her thing with Arnold began, or how they met, but he did learn that our children had been around them. Apparently, Lilith drove out to their campus, picked them up, and took them out to eat. The investigator followed them, and he got video and audio of their dinner. No doubt, it was them. She introduced Arnold as her partner. I don't know what lies she told them, but whatever they were, they worked. They had every opportunity to reach out to me. They didn't. After I charged breakfast to my room, I hailed a cab and headed to a used car lot. Didn't bother officially checking out of the hotel either. Let Lilith guess why. My trip wasn't supposed to end until Monday anyway. Armed with little more than an old car and the clothes I wore, I headed for the coast. By Saturday night, I stood barefoot in the sand. After unlocking funds tied to my newly assumed identity, I found myself with enough local currency to indulge a bit. The first luxury I allowed myself was a proper meal and a few drinks. During dinner, a magnetic woman struck up a conversation, eventually charming me into spending even more of my fresh cash. Compared to the soulless interactions I'd grown accustomed to over the last 20 years, the energy of this encounter was electric. The night unfolded in intervals of gratification, enough to keep me interested without overwhelming me. Given the favorable exchange rate, the entire experience felt almost comically inexpensive. I could easily make this kind of evening my new normal. That was the intention, at least for the time being. I bought a laptop and a phone, hoping to establish new channels of communication. Bridging this new identity with my old life, however, would prove to be no small feat. I set up a VoIP line and soon received a message from Steve. He said Lilith had called him, but hung up right after he made a sarcastic comment about their history. If nothing else, Lilith must have known I still had the gun Howard left me. Most nights I lay awake, teetering on the edge of oblivion, haunted by the idea of ending it all. But in that moment, I was high, on attention more than anything. What I hadn't yet understood was that Arnold had been orchestrating everything from the beginning, turning me into his personal entertainment. A year ago, if someone had told me I'd get caught up in an affair, I would have laughed them off. The thought was absurd, until it wasn't. I first encountered Arnold at the gym. He always seemed to show up when I did. In hindsight, I can't believe I fell for his polished, practiced lies. But maybe, deep down, I just needed someone, anyone, other than Howard to remind me I was still desirable. Arnold knew how to wait. His flattery turned into drinks, which led to late-night chats in dimly lit parking lots. The first real mistake came when I agreed to join him for a meal at a fast food place. Why would a married woman sneak off to meet a married man like that? It started with innocent talk and ended with lingering touches during our goodbyes. Before long, I found myself thinking about Arnold even while I was with Howard. That shift in thought marked the beginning of the end. Once my mind crossed that line, the rest followed easily. Every compliment from Arnold stroked my ego and pushed me further into his web. We began seeing each other weekly at his vacation house. Coming home late under the guise of running errands became routine. When Howard left town on business, I spent the entire time immersed in Arnold's world. Eventually, Arnold began sowing the idea that I should leave Howard, take what was mine from the marriage, and start anew with him. He promised to leave his wife, too. I made the catastrophic decision to tell our children about my intentions, something I now suspect Arnold encouraged, locking me deeper into his illusion. Even when Howard left for Atlanta, I hadn't made up my mind about what I really wanted. When Howard called, I did my best to sound composed. But the next morning, while gathering my things to leave Arnold's, I saw a message from my sister. Howard had sent her a box, with undeniable proof of my infidelity. I showed Arnold. His reaction was ice cold. Well, now he knows. Time for you to file for divorce. But that wasn't what I wanted. Not truly. I stood frozen, unable to speak. Then I rushed to the bathroom and vomited. What had I done? Right then, a car pulled up. A man stepped out and served Arnold with divorce papers. He looked at them, muttered something bitter, and didn't even glance back. She's not taking me for everything. You deal with your own mess. I'm out. Then he walked away, just like that. When I returned home, the house had been stripped bare. Not a single trace of our shared life remained. I barely made it to the bathroom before throwing up again. As I lay curled on the floor, the doorbell rang. A package waited on the porch. I already dreaded what it might contain. The letter from Howard shattered me. I reached out to our children and confessed how far I had fallen. They had received packages too. Howard had sent them damning footage of me with Arnold. Their shock was matched only by the pain of knowing their father had cut ties with them as well. They still clung to hope for a chance to explain. So did I. After grabbing some greasy food I couldn't even keep down, I headed to the consignment shop. To my surprise, my credit card still worked. A few of my possessions had already been sold, and the smug clerk told me I'd need to pay a cancellation fee if I wanted them back. It was cheaper to simply buy back the few things I couldn't bear to lose. But my stomach was already in rebellion from the fast food. I tried calling Howard, but a drunken stranger picked up. The kids had no better luck reaching him. I didn't think Steve would be any help, but I had no pride left. He laughed when I asked him for leads. Tell you what, Lilith, $50 a night to serve drinks in a push-up bra. Gotta showcase the goods. Deal? Screw you, you creep. Hey, I'm offering work. I heard your love life found a new address that didn't include your husband. I ended the call. I couldn't bear to listen to another word. That weekend dragged on like an eternity. I slept on the cold, empty floor and debated whether anything at that damn store was worth reclaiming. The only footwear I had left were the battered shoes I wore on the walk home that day. All my cosmetics were gone, ruined beyond salvage. I stopped at a discount store to pick up the bare essentials for personal care. Reaching out to people I trusted was pointless. Howard had already circulated the footage. After that, no one wanted any contact with me. Not long after, I got a chilling call from Howard's attorney. By Friday, the locks on the house would be replaced, whether or not I was still living there. If the new owners felt inclined, they could even press charges for trespassing. That Thursday, I stuffed what I could into my car and booked the cheapest motel I could find. The man at the front desk glanced at me like I was just another stray off the curb. At that point, I had no place to live. I was aware there were financial accounts, maybe some savings, maybe investments, but after reading Howard's last message, I wasn't holding out much hope. Every bank visit took hours, and I had to fight to prove I had any legal right to the funds. What I eventually accessed wasn't enough to afford rent, even for a tiny apartment. Fortunately, the credit cards hadn't been cut off yet. With careful budgeting, I estimated I could get by for up to a year on credit, less if the accounts were frozen. I began calling divorce attorneys, but that only added to the sense of despair. None were willing to take the case without an upfront retainer, and nobody worked on contingency. When Arnold reached out saying he needed a place to crash, I actually let out a laugh. He suggested we keep each other company in our mutual misery. I told him which motel I was staying at. I left the door open a crack and waited out in my car. I'd also left a note asking him to strip down. When I walked back in, he was standing there completely nude. Howard's words echoed in my mind, aim and pull the trigger. I fired once. I'd intended to hit his chest, but the bullet landed squarely between his eyes. I flushed the note and waited for the cops. The officer who arrived didn't buy my story that I'd walked in on a naked stranger and shot him in self-defense. I cited the state's Make My Day statute. They confiscated the weapon and brought me in for questioning. Though I was let go initially, they arrested me 2 days later on a first-degree murder charge. I hadn't considered the phone records. They painted the picture of a premeditated lure. The public defender assigned to my case looked painfully inexperienced. I didn't hold out much hope for acquittal. One small silver lining. I no longer had to think about rent or bills, but life inside was harsher than I could have imagined, relentlessly cruel, humiliating, and terrifying. After enduring a series of physically and emotionally punishing nights, I finally snapped. When another inmate tried to dominate me, I struck back with savage force. I stabbed her with everything I had. That incident got me moved out of general population, into solitary. As grim as it was, the isolation may have spared my life. My former cellmate had warned me I wasn't safe. Later, when I asked a guard about my food, he told me I'd need to cooperate if I wanted to eat. I degraded myself for a meal. I reached a point where I just wanted it all to stop. "Hey, Steve, it's Howard. What's going on? You should probably sit down for this. Lilith killed Arnold. Afterward, she tried to take her own life. She's in a psych ward now." Steve's words were surreal, like something from a nightmare. "I'll call you back, Steve. I need a minute to process this." My lawyer told me he'd dig into what happened and advised me to wait before taking any steps. He asked if I was ready to return home and started discussing how to recover my assets. He told me to stay put while he verified everything. I went for a walk by the shore and found companionship without much effort. I was indulging in my freedom. After a night of pleasure, I called it quits. Thankfully, I'd secured all my valuables in the room's safe. The money was well spent. I couldn't remember the woman's name, but I figured I might recognize her if we crossed paths again. The next day, When she didn't reappear, I met someone else just as willing. This arrangement worked perfectly for me. At a lower price, the experience was shorter but still satisfying. I've come to rely on these interactions. During those moments, my past life doesn't exist. They say money can't buy happiness, but it can get you ice cream, and ice cream brings smiles. The same goes for companionship. Being married had its advantages, until it didn't. Now, spending on struggling single moms feels weirdly charitable. It's been nearly 9 months since my lawyer told me I could come back. I no longer believe that's in the cards. I've rarely skipped a night since that first visit. On some days, I spend time with multiple companions one after another. By lunchtime, they recognize me on sight and seem genuinely happy to see me. Maybe I'm paying above the going rate, but it's worth every cent to me. I even tried a double once, but it didn't live up to the fantasy. Still, you never know until you try. Though the resentment I harbored toward my children hadn't entirely faded, I sent each of them a card. Inside every envelope, I placed a single quarter, taped neatly to the paper. My message read, "When you find yourself trapped, unsure of which direction to take, I hope you'll have the courage and conscience to make the right choice. But if that fails you, flip this coin. Let it decide. Whichever path you choose, this coin belongs to you now. It's all I have left to give." Lilith's fate remains unchanged. She's still institutionalized, ruled mentally unfit by the court. The charge of murder still shadows her record. Should she ever be declared sane, her legal troubles will only worsen. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.